I'd like to call the order of the Quarry Monitoring Committee on September 27th. Please call the roll.
Alderman Barber.
Here.
Member Swenson.
Here.
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
Here.
Member Tenhaken.
Here.
Member Pins.
Here.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Has anybody had a chance to read the minutes? Any questions or comments?
They look good to me.
Look good.
I would move to approve.
Okay, motion to approve is on the table. Anybody second that?
I'll second it.
Okay. It's all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Say, if those not, say no. Okay, moving on to item 3, citizen comment period. Are there any citizens wishing to speak? Please state your name and your address. Please state your name and your address, sir.
Clint Wininger, Payne and Nolan, 2123 Springbrook North, Waukesha. Just had a couple questions I wanted to make. First of all, introduction. I want to introduce Wes Heinlein. He's a new aggregate manager for us. Quarry, day-to-day operations manager for us. He comes from, I can't remember who your last employer was. I just skipped the last one. I go right to 8 years of service in the Army, right? And then his last tour was, I think, Alaska. So he goes from Alaska to downtown Milwaukee. But he's working with us. We've had him employed here in Milwaukee. But he's working with us. We've had him employed here for the last 6 months. But he's working at the Franklin Quarry in our operations. So civil engineer by training, I think, right? So just want to make sure we introduce him because he's a face that's around more day to day. So. The second thing was the opportunity to have, I forget the pack number, but the local pack from Pleasant Valley School, Cub Scouts, go for a quarry tour about a week and a half ago. And I think we had, it was well over 100, I don't know if it was 120 was the final count, I think. But we had 3 buses of Cub Scouts and their parents and escorts come through and did a tour of the quarry and got to see some equipment, had a geology display out for them, and got to spend an hour and a half with them or so at the quarry. And it's a group we'd done that with a couple years ago as well, but they'd had a lot of new pack members. Done that with a couple years ago as well, but they'd had a lot of new pack members. So we figured it was the year before COVID started too, so they remembered that and said, hey, it'd be great after 3 years to be able to come out again. But so we were able to do that as well. And then the only last thing I had was I know you tried to organize a tour with the group, and I know that's going to be really hard to get people on the same page open. So I just want to make sure that I continue to extend tours individually. All you have to arrange that. Kristen, you went and, I think we had a good probably hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, went all over. And sometimes it's easier to do in smaller groups because if there's something that really interests you, we can get out and look at it. Or if it's why the equipment's running, we can do that. So, but Regulo has my contact info. Kristen does. Mike does too. So feel free to reach out, call my cell phone, and we'll arrange that at any time to do that. So I just want to make sure. That may be easier than to try to coordinate all together, right. Just because I know everybody's running different directions and it gets a little tougher. But so I just want to make sure we made that available.
One question came up when I was trying to do the organizing of it. You don't entertain a group or tours to watch an explosion or a blast on a particular day or anything? Just to see
like for committee members, if that something schedule is all over during the week. I mean, it's typically between usually about 8 and 4, I think, most often, Monday through Friday. So if you have flexibility on what day, usually our blasting schedule, we might know a week ahead of time. So it's a little more short notice, but yeah, if that's something that you would like to see. So it's a little more short notice, but yeah, if that's something that you would like to see, we can definitely.
Just to get an understanding of how that whole
Yep.
process works.
Yeah, I was there during the blast.
Yep.
You were?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't have any issue with.
Okay.
With making that happen, so it
So
just
that-
takes a little more coordination than
Yeah.
being able to say the third Wednesday from.
Class?
No, I don't.
I have to,
Because I know you had a friend of yours was taking a lot of pictures, I
Yeah.
remember, so.
So were any of the scouts interested in the Quarry Monitoring Committee? Were you grooming anybody?
You know, it was interesting because different groups by different ages, and it was, at times it was like herding cats, if you would, so. They all have, but they're actually, showed a lot of interest. They like the equipment, the fossils, you know, the candy bars always help. And passing out always help too, they like that, so. But, so that's all, I just want to make sure
Is
that.
Brian still with the quarry?
What's that?
Who was in charge of the quarries? Who was in charge of the quarry? Is he still there? The one that was day to day?
Well, Mike said he was there for a while. Mike's retired a few years ago. Kyle Bosch is
Who was in the office with you?
Brian Endress,
Yeah.
who's my supervisor. Basically, he runs our whole manufacturing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's still with us.
Mining gold?
I was not. No, I was with the Army.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, no,
I thought maybe there was.
there was plenty of people out there doing that.
I thought that was mining experience that maybe you had.
Oh, okay, no.
He was mining experience in the Army.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of good boxes to check.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of good boxes to check. Civil engineer helps, right? Definitely a military career helps. I mean,
Sure.
and I think there's numerous. Kristen, I think you served, right? And Mike, I don't know if, but you know that always helps. We get a lot of good people that serve in the military. So.
Let's come to any meeting you want.
Absolutely.
On item 4, there are no hearings, I believe, at this point that are had, and then we'll move on to business, or item 5, which is business.
oh no, Barbara, can I ask you about, I don't think we've ever had a hearing. Is that like necessary to even have that? Because we do that like every meeting, no hearings, no hearings. It's like,
Bunch,
we're
isn't
not,
it?
can you ask the city attorney if
Sure.
we can just
Do we
take that
have
off
to have
of them?
any?
It's
Do
like,
we have to have that, or is that just a protocol?
I don't think, I'm not aware that.
If we don't have one, let's not list it. How's that? Not to exclude
Right.
the potential of a hearing, not to exclude
Right.
the potential of a hearing. Okay, I'll let you take over item 5 then.
So in the packet, you will find the blasting data. So we only received one complaint since the last meeting, and actually it's not in the date range that you have in your packets because it was received last week on the 21st, and the ground vibration and the air overblast was in compliance. 0.1 vibration and the air overblast was in compliance. 0.13 for the ground vibration and 119 decibels for the air overblast.
So on this report, everything would be in compliance then
Yes.
for the,
Yeah. However, you will receive the next quarterly report from Stantec for the November meeting.
Question.
any questions or comments on any of this data?
I have a question, I guess. Maybe I've just been kind of going with the flow here, but in the vibration limit, it's stated that it shall not exceed 0.30 inches per second, et cetera. And none of the figures is anywhere near 0.35. Am I missing a mathematical conversion? Is that the PPV, or what is the ground vibration? What column is that in?
Oh, the one that says PPV, correct.
Oh, okay. So they're allowed to blast up to 0.3 inches per second,
Correct.
and they're at, because they're at like 0.048, 0.095. Is it that they're blasting so lightly? Or am I missing a mathematical conversion? I need to move the decimal point 2 places or something.
No. For example, the complaint that I just mentioned, the recorded blast was .13. Recorded blast was .13. So it was like 30% of the
A third
maximum
of-
limit,
yeah.
so,
Okay.
yeah.
So that was on 7/12? 7/12 was when the complaint was?
Oh, no, the complaint was September 21st, so you don't have it
Or
in your
August-
packet.
August
because-
12th, or
No, no.
July 12th?
21st, so we didn't include it because we just received it last week after we sent the packets.
Okay,
So-
got it. I was looking at the July number. It was .13 or whatever you had mentioned.
Which neighborhood?
Barber, I had asked, so I'm waiting to be called.
Pardon me?
I'm waiting to be called upon. I asked to speak. I don't know how you're doing.
No, thank you. Go ahead.
On the red markings on here, regular, what's the significance in the red figures? Regular, what's the significance in the red figures?
The red means that is the monitor that recorded the highest ground vibration or air overblast of that event.
Okay. And then I thought we had tried to correlate the same meeting, so we're not going to get, so this one starts and goes through September, and the first date it starts is 8/30, and this one this one goes 8 to 9, and this one goes 8 to 9, and this one goes
So
7 to
yeah.
8.
So Clean send the report every month. So we
Right.
have here the July, August, but for September, because when we send the packets, the month is still going, I go and log in the ViberTech site that we have access to, and then I print the whatever date we have available,
So-
because the month is still going.
So for the ViberTech month of 7, which is July, through the early months of August, you have that one, right? You have July ViberTech, right?
Correct, but I didn't print it because it was not necessary, because it will be like a duplicate, because we already have the July report from Blink.
The previous meeting.
Okay. It just seems to make sense. Okay. It just seems to make sense that we would want the recordings to correlate. So I want to look at July when they're giving me July.
It is the same information.
It's the same information, but I can't go on July text and go on July 26th. I can't compare dates.
But it is the same, it's just a different format.
Yeah, if you look at August 30th, the numbers are exactly the same.
Am I missing a page or something?
Chris, are you talking about trying to take your quarter monitoring, that you have Stantec do their blast results in correlated stars?
Right.
No, that,
Okay,
no, static data, that is different. But that will be presented with the every quarterly report.
Right.
Yeah, that's a different data. That's a different data, yeah. correct.
So when we have, I'm sorry, maybe I can just, when we have the quarterly report for Zantec, that will bring both sites together to be reviewed month by month.
Correct. We don't have that data now because that is scheduled for the next meeting.
Okay.
So next,
Repeat the Payne and Dolan and Frankenhager's July again in the next packet, so we'll have Julys with Julys.
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Right.
go ahead.
so the information, our blast information, right in their report, and it's side by side for each one, so it's
Yeah.
right in there, it's really easy to track on date, right in their report.
So
for ours and
so
theirs.
we just basically have to wait till that quarterly report to coordinate them all together, and we're not going to ever get the monthly report. And we're not going to ever get the monthly reports jiving together. It doesn't seem like. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's why we have the quarterly report.
Okay.
Question for you,
And-
Regulo.
Oh, yeah.
What neighborhood did the complaint come from?
This is the neighborhood from the east of 51st Street.
Okay.
And I would like to mention to that, Kristen, that Stantec in the next meeting in November, they will present the scope of work or services for 2023. So if you want to make any changes, like a monthly report or anything similar, then you can comment next meeting.
So the complaint that you got came from my district this time? On the east side? Yeah.
As east of 51st Street, close by Marquette Avenue.
It wasn't me.
Close by Marquette Avenue.
It wasn't me. I'm 3 blocks that way.
I was just wondering if we're getting the new homes yet, because that's pretty close to Marquette Avenue.
It's funny, I had walked through the neighborhood where Viridian is building on the biggest home on 50th Street, and real nice guy. And Omar said, "Yeah, I love the berm over here. The looks like I'm out in the country." He said, well, "You know, it's on the other side of the berm, don't you? There's a quarry over there." He goes, "Oh, I did not know that."
Wow.
He's not from the area, so
Wow.
he's not from the area, so.
Well, but actually, in the plat of the new subdivision, there's a note that says that
Yeah, we
there's a
had 'em put the
quarry
note.
nearby.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So
He
he
didn't
was,
notice the detail either. But
you know, now you can tell them, did you look at your plat?
that's right.
No, Kristen mentioned the red
That's
detail,
Alderwoman Wilhelm.
the red detail on Vibertech. What was that again? You kind of said I didn't quite pick up on what you
Oh,
said.
I mean, for
The Vibertech
yeah,
red
for
numbers.
each event, then we have monitors. Then the highest recording, the monitors that records the highest value, that will be in red.
Okay.
Oh, on that date range, I got it. On that date range of.
Correct.
The four regions.
For that event.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 4 weeks and the 14th.
Correct.
The four regions of-
For that event.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 4 weeks and the 14th, a .050 was the highest of that group of 4. Okay. Gotcha.
Because that looks like a red flag. Can we go to
No,
green
no.
or yellow
No,
or
no.
something? I know you've explained it before, but
Right.
everybody sees it as a red flag rather than,
Red
Oh.
means out
Yeah,
of
that's
compliance.
Vibertech's website.
But I think it makes easier when you're looking at the data and you want to spot if there is any event that is over the limits. It will make it easier just to look at the event that is over the limits. It will make it easier just to look at the red numbers.
And then what does NT mean?
Not
Not tested?
triggered. Not triggered.
Okay.
It does kind of go to my point, though, that all of these blasts are like a very small fraction of what's allowed in the
Well,
quarry.
if they did it at the what's allowed, we would get a lot more complaints, let me
We'd be
tell
very
you.
devoted.
Oh, yeah.
Well, for ground vibration, the PPV column, but for air overblast, the limit is 100 decibels.
right.
So that is closer, I will say, but it's rarely over the limits.
But we know people in Franklin have sensitive ears to noise.
and I don't want to give anybody kudos they don't deserve, but it seems like lately the blasting is a lot more. They don't deserve, but it seems like lately the blasting is a lot more. I mean, I've had people comment that they kind of don't even know it's happening when it's happening, especially on the days when you get a notification. They'll say that they don't even, okay. So there must be a new technique, but I don't know what it is, but we used to get a lot heavier shock and vibration than we have recently in the last couple of years, so it's improved somewhat. I don't know how or why, but
Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I think that's what he's saying. And I would agree with that. I've gotten less
Well,
complaints.
and part of it's location in Quarry, right, where we are in Quarry makes a difference. But like Chris can remember, we've been blasting that whole
just wondering, as you get closer and closer, it might pick up again, so.
It can, like I said, the tier district, we're pretty much there, except for maybe in the southeast corner.
Right,
But there's some to the south, I mean, some of them in the southeast corner.
right.
But there's some to the south, I mean, some of them blasted up, some of them are not, so, it can, I won't say that it won't, but, some we still monitor.
Just keep them in Mike's district and we'll be good.
Just a quick question, in construction and everything, where it's construction's at, is that potentially a year-round thing now for you going into it, depending on weather?
I think it'll be probably similar to what happened last year. And it's been pretty steady
Has it?
down here. This has been with where the market's at now and interest rates and inflation rate, we're kind of looking at crystal balls and it's gonna happen this year. We expect it to slow down to some degree, but we just don't know. We just don't know what. But this year was actually busier than we thought it was going to be.
No, good, yeah.
In some areas were busier, but that always happens depending on the nature of the work is.
No, that's a factor somewhat, so I just thought it,
But, no, it's been pretty consistent.
I was kind of expecting that with the Build Back Better initiatives that the Washington DC has put out, that there'd be more construction and bridge replacements and demand for concrete and all of that stuff. But
if you can get the
it
other
takes a while
stuff.
to leak into the system, I guess.
If we can get the other
Takes a while
stuff.
to leak into the system, I guess.
If we can get the other parts of that equation, like steel and
Yeah.
everything else that
That
goes
too,
into it.
yeah.
Okay, moving on to 5B. That's something I asked to be put on the agenda because we started talking about it just to get the committee's feeling about getting information on the who part of who is complaining. We get a number that says 1 complaint or 2 complaints, but we had started a discussion on that at the last meeting. So I'm just wondering, is there, my thought of it, and I'm just going to throw this out on the table, is that possibly we could identify a person as we don't have to give the names if we don't want to list names and stuff, but the first complaint that comes in, that person is number 1. The first complaint that comes in, that person is number 1. Second complaint would be number 2. Then if a number 1 comes in again, it's just listed as the number 1. Rather than a name and an address, just designate it as a number 1, so that, say, at the end of the year, we know we've gotten 4 complaints. And I think that would solve the problem of naming names and addresses, which we don't want to do. But it would give us some idea of the frequency, and if we ever wanted to go back and look at data, you could, but it would just tell us if is the same person complaining all the time without a name and an address, a person complaining all the time without a name and an address. So I'm thinking that maybe we could do something like that, if that would be acceptable. But just what the thoughts are from the rest of the committee. I don't want to make a motion.
Barbara, I guess I see that we already get so I don't know as if we want to pinpoint it down to person per household, because I can see this happening where it's like, oh, we know it's Dave over there. Oh, Dave. And then Dave all of a sudden gets a bad name just because he happens to be in a vein where he's always getting rattled. And I don't know if that's necessarily something that we need to know.
Well, it was raised at
and-
the meeting, so I'm just asking what
Yeah.
everybody else
Well,
thinks.
you were asking for my opinion. The other opinion I have regarding the complaint process is I've always felt like the complaint process across the city should be the same for every complaint. And the fact that we have a particular process for the quarry, which is different than any other business, I never quite understood. if we have a complaint form on the city's website for noise complaints, why is this one treated differently? So,
Okay, that's another subject or another kind of a topic, but
It's the
what is the
complaint
rest of the,
process, same
what is
process.
another rest kind of a topic, but
It's the
what is the
complaint
rest of the,
process, same
what does
process.
another, rest of the committee feel about doing some kind of identifier, or knowing who it is that complains, whether it be 2 times a year or 3 times a year, or every blast where they pick up the phone and call, you know, that kind of a thing that is possibly out there, but I can't. I think our complaints are so far and few between now that it'd be interesting just to know, basically, without knowing the name or the location, just whether we get 5 complaints from one person
If you want,
during a year.
If I could ask, I don't know the complaint form, I haven't seen it, but is it an intake form? Is it a phone call? Is it computer where? there's
which one,
different
the
things?
city one or the,
This one, so,
there's 2 complaint processes. One, there's a Quarry complaint form, and they can also call, there's a Quarry complaint form, and they can also call staff and make, complaint through that. The city process for everything else in the city is a different complaint form, and the way that works is you make a complaint and you're required to put your name in there, but they don't give the names to the alderman. They don't give the names out unless there's a specific open records request. Now, what we're talking about here is almost being able to identify somebody a little bit easy. It doesn't seem like we should be going over and above the process that we already have. We've already done that by having a completely separate form. Because in the regular process, if they get X amount of complaints, you can be considered a nuisance if you're a business. If you're not the Quarry, and in the regular form, if you get X amount of complaints, and the city has to go out and handle that, you can be called a nuisance and you can get a fine. But under this process, since it's removed from that, you can have hundreds of complaints and it'll never be considered a nuisance because it follows a certain process. And I already think because it's so specialized already, I'm not really thinking specializing it more down to who it is when we don't do that either with the city process is really serving the citizens. It's kind of the opposite.
Number of years, when did the other monitoring committees come into play? The landfill monitoring committee is one that I know, but we are a monitoring committee, so that makes us somewhat different than the regular complaint process. And it had been established initially before any of the others probably came into being. So that's why we'd be separate and unique, because it is prescribed to have this within the ordinance.
Well, I can't speak to which came first, but then here and then dissolved. It just depends on how the politics go. So landfill siting committee has pretty much stayed steady, has never been dissolved to my knowledge. So.
Anybody else have any thoughts about the initial discussion about keeping track of where the frequency of the complaints?
if you wanted to track
Go ahead.
the number of complaints coming from a certain citizen, you could compare the Stantec reports and look at the map and
Right.
count up the number of dots in a certain,
And that'd be easier if it was linked to a person, not a person, but a number, just a generic number. We had 5 complaints from this number in the report. We had 3 complaints from this number, and it's just a numeric identifier without listing it.
And how would it serve our committee better to know that? We know the area, we know the general area, we know the complaint, we know the levels, we know if they're over or under. I'm trying to figure out what the advantage of knowing, hey, it was knowing hey, it was Ed 6 times last month.
Well,
I don't see the advantage of that.
In the past, there's been people that would call in every time there'd be a blast.
Well,
And
maybe they're home.
I don't want to discount that, but I'd like to know if the same person is calling.
Oh.
I don't want to discount that, but I'd like to know if the same person is calling in all the time. Not to call them a nuisance as such, but are they doing it just because they've had a problem or an axe to grind? Maybe that could be an identifier there as a way of saying, maybe this person does have something to motivate them other than the fact that their house is shaking. Maybe they're just angry people.
That should be very evident in the Stantec reports.
Yeah.
of them.
Okay, well,
Congregational
it was
dots
brought
and
up at the
circles.
last meeting, so I just wanted to put more discussion, so I'm not hearing any groundswell to say go ahead and try to do that at this point.
To the other point, I have no experience with the general city complaint form, or to what that process is, because I'm just an easygoing guy. I've never complained before, But I don't know how that, But I don't know how we differ, how this complaint form differs from the city's general complaint form.
It has some specific information related to Quarry events. Like, for example, if there's a checkbox for if this complaint about like blast or dust. It also asks about the conditions and temperature of the blast event, of the time during the blast event. So it provides specific information that the regular complaint form.
Is pertinent to the type of information that is uniquely identified to Quarry events.
Correct.
Okay.
Except on a regular complaint form, I could write in the same thing. I could say, on this day, it was raining, and I saw a truck going down and the road was dusty, and that would do the exact same thing as it. Politically, I know why it was set up. It just avoids the nuisance complaint issue. That's all it does. It's a, sorry, Clint, it's a business-friendly thing. I'm not asking to change it, but it is what it is. It's a separate process. Doesn't necessarily have to be. At some point, somebody determined that might be better to do it that way, and so.
Landfill monitoring committee has a complaint form. Do they do something with that?
No, they're unaware of.
So there aren't that many monitoring committees where we had specific monitoring duties. So a complaint coming in could be generic. Where this would be isolated to just our complaints.
The only one that I'm aware of that has a separate process than the city ordinance does for everything else, besides this one, is somehow in the complaint process, the noise complaint ends up at the police department.
Correct, but for noise complaints, the complainant will go through the website and use the regular form. There's no like a specific form for noise complaint.
I've been told that the residents have been told to contact the police as part of their process. So
Correct, because if they submit the complaint through the city website for a noise event on a weekend, Saturday,
right, it's not going to get.
We just work Monday through Friday. So.
Right, it's going to have to go through. That's another thing about the city process. That's another thing about the city process. It go into the system, say, I put a complaint in there. And then it goes to the department, and then the department, whoever, Lisa or whatever, looks at it. And then they have to take and send it to the pertinent department, looks at it. And then they have to take and send it to the pertinent department. So they have to say, oh, is this regular planning department, or is this an engineering complaint, or is this an inspection complaint? And then it gets to them. And then they have their workload, and so it can take quite a while. The only one that has a little even longer, because now you have to send first the weed cutter has to go out and look to see if there's a violation. And if they determine there's a violation, then they have to go back to the clerk's office, and the clerk has to send a letter saying, cut, or we will cut it for you, and we'll put it on the bill. And then they give them X amount of days to take 2 to 3 weeks. Easy. So, I don't know. For me, I think this has been working. I think we get the little houses on the map to show kind of where it's coming from, and I don't see further detailing it down to the exact name of the person, or numbering the name of the person or address of the house. That's
No,
just
you'd just see a number, you wouldn't see the name or the address.
right.
Clint, you had to raise your hand.
Yeah, I don't know.
Raise your hand.
Yeah, I don't know, when the complaint form went in. Sorry about that.
I don't know when the complaint form went in and when all that started, but some of the practicality and the benefits of it is if you go through the form, the residents can often, but when there's a location, at least for us, we can see where the complaint's coming. We can then go back and see what activity we were doing with the blast. Okay, was there anything different? How is this person being affected? Because then we can help fine-tune some of what we're doing, where if that's anonymous, you can't do that. But if somebody wants to be anonymous, we respect that. But the other thing, too, that occurs a lot is a lot of times those neighbors want to be contacted, and if they do, we're usually calling them back within a day, if not the same day, and reaching out to them, talking to them. Sometimes it's just they don't know what we do, like the person that moved into the new house over there, and hey, here's what we do, and we'll oftentimes go see those people, and here's what we do, here's how we're monitored, and then also use that as an educational process as well. And there's oftentimes we'll put a seismograph in somebody's yard too, so you can actually see what's happening there in addition to the other monitors. So there is a lot come out of it that you might not see at the committee level that probably don't happen in a complaint process with the other ones. I don't know how that works in the city, but I think there's a lot of benefit to the way that has worked. But if there's no location, no name or anything, then there's nothing as a business we can do to even look at how we're doing things internally to make any adjustments, because you don't know where those are even coming from. So you don't know how to adjust what we're doing. So.
And in the process, one of the things that Kristen or Alderman Wilhelm just mentioned, you have to go to the office, they'd have to make a determination, and then it would have to come to obviously it would come directly to the Quarry Monitoring Committee after it had been reviewed in the office and sent here. I think it's easier just to come to the Quarry Monitoring through the Quarry form than build that extra step internally to have someone look at it and then send it over. So, I mean, it just kind of, the flow seems to work. I'm not hearing any consensus to changing either the identification process or at this point. So, if at some point that somebody else wants to take a look at this, we could always do that, but I'm not hearing anybody saying right now that we should really go out and change anything.
Alderman Barber, I have a suggestion related to the complaint process, and I don't know I don't want to get too far off the agenda because it's necessarily this exact item, but we had talked about the new homes, and we talked about how can we help the complaint process so maybe people have a better understanding. And so Clint had brought up, the new neighbors, and you frequently talk to them. So as part of this, if you could help us with the educational portion for the new neighborhood, and maybe in the long run that will help the complaint process. I don't know if you want to think about what maybe you hire, or an informational thing you'd be willing to do, or if it's not something you want to call attention, you want to wait and see if it goes, that's one thing, but I'm just throwing that out there as a thought of how we could maybe offset that in the future, and just an idea. just an idea, informational, because I think once people understand what you do and the benefits of what you bring, it often can offset the complaint. So.
Our product is in your foundation and on
Right.
your driveway.
And in the road in front of your house, and.
Absolutely
yeah.
it is, yeah. Absolutely
Yeah.
it is, yeah. Yeah,
Okay, any more discussion on item 5B? Okay, let's talk about the meeting. We've got the next meeting coming up in November?
November.
Understand.
We may choose Tuesday, the 22nd.
What day is Thanksgiving on?
24th and 25th.
And let's see.
Is everybody going to be cooking turkeys on the 22nd, or?
We're hoping you're going to do it, bring it in here in the committee meeting.
I can bring in a turkey. Just show up as myself. Okay, the 22nd works for me.
Okay.
Yep,
If
that's
it's-
good.
So the council meeting will be what, on the 1st and the 15th in that month?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And then we'll have the 22nd. Okay. And then we get to see.
If you like, yeah.
What a nice present. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
I second.
Second.
Yep.
Been moved and second to adjourn. We are now adjourned.